its tanks. Its first platoon was completely bogged down. This ground was supposed to be frozen, so right away I knew C Company was of no help. So B Company started to advance down the town. We were hitting resistance, but it was not major resistance. The 10th Armored Infantry was working with us. As we got down into town, they would go into the buildings, around the buildings where the German soldiers were. B Company gets through the town, and at that point, the heavens open up and all hell breaks loose. We're suddenly hit all at once by direct fire. Now it's a matter of survival.
Erzik and his men have driven into an ambush and now face the most lethal tank killer in the German arsenal. A massive self-propelled gun called the Jag Tiger. The Battle of the Bulge enters its 7th bloody day. Elements of the 5th Panzer Army have driven 80 kilometers into Belgium and encircled the key Allied-held town of Bastogne. General George Patton sends the 4th Armored Division to break the siege. And on the morning of December 23rd, Lieutenant Colonel Albin Erzik leads his tanks into the village of Chaumont, 12 kilometers south of Bastogne.
So B Company started to advance down the town. And at that point, the heavens open up and all hell breaks loose. You just cannot describe the chaos that's there. It was a platoon of 4 Tiger Jags.
The Jag Tiger is a self-propelled tank killer, a 71-ton armored beast with a 128-millimeter cannon that can tear open a Sherman more than 3.5 kilometers away.
There's tanks being hit, bang, 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 all over the place. B Company is downtown, and you can't turn in town, so we're very vulnerable. So I told my driver to start backing up. Now he's backing up blind. He needs some help from me. So as we moved back out, I had the turret turned, so I could see the road, and I'm directing the driver. So that means the back of the turret is toward the enemy, which makes it very, very vulnerable. And I began to breathe a little easier when it seemed like we were out of range. When suddenly I heard this loud, screeching, horrible sound just for an instant. And the tank was pushed forward as though some sledgehammer had hit it. 128, which should have breezed through the turret like a hot knife through butter, but it must have hit the ricochet off. So I told the driver, keep going. As we were moving back, I noticed there was a seam in the tank turret with daylight showing. So I knew something had hit the turret. And we finally pulled the tank out of range. I asked myself the question, why are we still here? Why did my tank survive this battle when I had this terrible, terrible blow? Next to the antenna well was something. It was an object. And to this day, I don't know why it was there. And the only thing I can conclude is that it must have hit this appendage and ricocheted off. It was an absolute miracle that I survived that battle and I'm still here.
At the Battle of Chaumont, Combat Command B loses 18 tanks and most of their crews. The Germans and their deadly Jag Tigers have stalled Colonel Erzig's drive to Bastogne. "12 kilometers to the southeast, tanks of the Combat Command Reserve move towards Bougainville. Their mission is to take the heavily defended town and protect the flank of units advancing towards Bastogne. En route, they encounter a German patrol.
But we made our approach into Bougainville, and I pulled our tank up behind the railroad track. Momentarily, here came a Sherman tank and 2 German SPs. They captured an American Sherman and painted out our stars and painted on their cross. And when I came up behind the railroad track, my hull was in defilade. Defilade, the tank comes up from the rear, and as it approaches up, its gun points over the hill. That's called hull defilade because the hull is not seen by the enemy. The gunner's periscope was about 14 inches higher than the tube. The gun was looking at the track. The sight was above the track. So when he fired, he hit the first rail. I said, push up a little bit, and he pushed up a little bit more, fired again, hit the second rail. I said, push up further. Yeah, roger. So I pushed it up enough that I got beyond the track, and we got a shell into the Sherman tank. And I also added another shell to each of these SPs.
With the German patrol outside Bougainville eliminated, Captain Leach leads his B Company into the center of the town.
So our approach in every village, we would recon by fire with the bow gun shooting one direction and the coax machine gun shooting another on the side of the roads. So we were an avalanche of fire, movement, fire, and movement. We fought in the hatch open mode. So you can see the targets, you know, quickly. With the periscope, you're limited. You're blind except for where you're looking. And with your eyes like this, you can move your head back and forth and see targets. So we can engage quickly, but the enemy could also engage us quickly because we're exposing ourselves. So we had a lot of injured tank commanders as a result of fighting unbuttoned. Our infantry had failed to clear out all the houses. The German soldiers were still in some of these houses. But my tanks were all over the streets. And moments later, I'm hit. The bullet went into the helmet, as you see right here. It cut the sweatband off of my head, and this I had underneath. And here is where the bullet hit my head and knocked me out. So I passed out and fell into the turret floor. They jokingly said, "Captain, get your butt back in the turret, you got work to do." Well, I did have work to do.
In 16 hours, the CCR takes Bougainville. And on December 24th, General Patton orders them to join the main attack towards Bastogne, and they spend Christmas Day moving west. Finally, on December 26th, the tanks of the Combat Command Reserve are poised to launch one of the most daring armored charges in the history of tank warfare. December 26, 1944. The Belgian town of Bastogne has been under siege for 5 days. Just south of town, lead elements of the 4th Armored Division CCR prepare to make one last attack against the German line and finally relieve the besieged Bastogne.
I led the attack that day, and Abrams joins me on position. Well, he said, "I'm going to run RC Company, Bogus, and pass through you straight ahead and go to Assinois and try to link up with the 101st Airborne to make that final breakthrough into Bastogne.
Lieutenant Charles Bogus leads 8 Sherman tanks into the heavily defended town of Assinois.
Bogus led the attack through here, and he had an armored infantry company with him, and they were busy fighting Germans who were resisting, trying to mine the road, and the artillery had knocked out several half-tracks, and mortar shells had knocked out several vehicles.
The German fire is intense, but Bogus and his men push right through it and advance down the final stretch of road leading to Bastogne.
It was quite a fight, really. I could hear it all shooting up ahead of me because Abrams left me in position there at Clochemont Hill.
A half-track in the column is destroyed by a German mine. Bogus pushes on with 2 other tanks and reaches the outskirts of Bastogne. There he encounters the final line of German defense, and Bogus and his wingman fire 3 rounds into it. The last obstacle on the road to Bastogne is eliminated. Moments later, men of the 101st Airborne emerge from the trees.
Bogus saw what looked like American uniform and hollered, "This is 4th Armored, come on out." And hesitatingly, the Americans commenced to then showing themselves.
The siege of Bastogne is broken. But for the 4th Armored Division, the cost of relieving the town has been steep. In just 10 days of combat, over 1,000 men are killed or wounded. And they lose 28 tanks. But their efforts mark the turning point in the Battle of the Bulge. The weather clears, and for the next 21 days, American tanks, now supported by airstrikes, force the Germans out of the Ardennes.
Once the weather cleared up and the sun was shining, they were able to deploy the artillery and air force and stabbed us in the back.
The fighter bombers were dangerous for us. On one tank, believe it or not, we counted 500 hits from a machine gun. We couldn't compete with that. And shortly after Christmas, we barely had any tanks left. And I thought, for God's sake, they have a lot of equipment than us with our tiny amount of tanks. At the end of 44, beginning of 45, we had no further supply. We had no further equipment to fight with.
The Battle of the Bulge, the largest battle on the Western Front, ends on January 12, 1945. The casualties on both sides are enormous. More than 90,000 German soldiers are killed, wounded, or captured. Almost 20,000 Americans die, and 50,000 are wounded. It's their bloodiest battle of the war. The Americans lose over 320 tanks, but the Germans' final gamble has cost more. They lose more than 500 irreplaceable panzers and will never launch another offensive.
Sitting here now, looking back, unbelievable. I can't believe I was there. I can't believe I did what I did. It's a very strange feeling. It was the lead element of Patton's army. It was the force that was successful in breaking the siege of Bastogne. I firmly believe that was the turning point of the Battle of the Bulge, and the Battle of the Bulge was the turning point of the war in Europe.